Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Thank you guys for hopping on stage with me. Today, really exciting conversation, revamping the consumer internet experience. I was really excited about talking with these guys today about this because, one, anyone that's dealt with an ISP knows that internet's kind of a pain in the ass. Two, I don't think there's many bigger TAMs out there than internet, right? And three, I don't think there's many things that crypto's working on that are just more impactful for the world as a whole. And I think these two guys are trailblazing this path, along with just being some of the most interesting applications in the DePin space as well. Yeah, just as far as intros, I'm Ishan. I'm one of the founders of Scribe. We are a creative comms and communications studio. We work with a lot of the largest projects in Web3. So I would love to hear from you guys. I would love if you guys could give backgrounds, a little bit about the company, and why you guys got started.
So hello, everybody. My name is Chedraui. I am the CEO and founder at Weru. About my background, I went to school for business and architecture. And then while I was doing architecture in Ecuador, I found myself with the necessity of having internet access. So I've always been like very tech savvy and very tech enthusiast. So I dropped out and I actually started building a way for people to get connectivity for free. So I built something that today is called Wi-Fi marketing. So we built one of the first platforms back in 2011, where we helped some places to provide connectivity in exchange of some data from the users. So this went great. I sold this to a multinational company. I worked for this company for a couple of years, like a Wi-Fi marketing director. And that led me to understand that I wasn't quite solving the problem that I wanted to solve, which was lack of connectivity. Back then, it was about, we're talking about 14 years ago, there was like about 4 billion people that didn't have connectivity. Today's a little bit better. It's shy of 3 billion, but there's still a lot of things to do. Today, I lead Weru. Weru is a decentralized global Wi-Fi network that helps, that allows anybody to provide connectivity or coverage to the network, either by deploying one of our hotspots or bringing their own hotspot using our firmware. We focus a lot on software and firmware. And on the other hand, people can connect for free using our mobile app, our captive portal, or we allow telcos to also offload data to our networks today.
What's up, guys? My name's Neil. Thanks for having me on here, man. So I can skip over my background. I don't really have that fun of a background. I was an electrical engineer. We can gloss over that. I'll say in terms of our story, which is, I think, a little bit interesting, we started off operating with the belief that the internet is just kind of effed up, and we wanted to fix it, right? I think everybody in crypto, DePin kind of gets into this one way or another, where it's like, hey, some specific piece of the internet that I love, that I grew up on, just sucks, and I just want to fix it. And my approach towards that was like, okay, let me go out and actually build my own internet service provider and see if I can beat Comcast and Verizon at their own game. So I started this with Princeton University, where I live now, to build like a little wireless network, and then we just started growing it, right? We saw that there's other people across the world that really needed these local ISPs that could really compete against the big guys. And so we ended up working with like the New York City Housing Authority, the Newark Housing Authority, and now that little ISP has grown into something that can operate in 10 different states right now. So it's been a cool thing to build, just to be able to see what it's like to be able to disrupt and compete against these big guys. But ultimately, I wanted to figure out how do I take the technology that I saw that really enabled all of this and bring it to the rest of the world. And that was really the genesis behind Dawn, which is a protocol for providing decentralized broadband. And so the easiest way to think about it is, I think in terms of like, for wireless, you can either service things that move, like your phone or your laptop, or you can service things that don't move, like your home or your business. And so we provide a protocol where people can use wireless to connect their homes and their businesses so that they can replace Comcast and Verizon. So that's the super simple pitch about what we do. And it is all thanks to and powered by wireless that really makes it so cheap, right? I think we're moving towards a society that is going to have less wires rather than more wires. So now we kind of just need to build a protocol that allows people to participate in this whole way, where they can just get cheaper, faster internet without having to rely on the big guys.
Yeah, appreciate both of you guys giving the background. One thing I want to pick your guys' brains about is one of the big criticisms of crypto is that it tends to be solutions looking for problems rather than problems looking for solutions. So when you guys each came up with your respective protocols, which was it, right? Did you guys come and see a problem and then come into the space? Or did you guys come from an angle of more, you know, hey, DePin is really interesting. What can I find to solve the problem in the space?
So in my case, and I think I speak for both of us, we saw a problem a while back, and we started building solutions around that problem to try and solve it. So when I was mentioning my background before and how I came to Weru, before Weru, I built a DePin before DePin was even a thing. So what we did, we helped small businesses in Latin America to sell micro Wi-Fi recharges. So that went great until COVID hit, and we had to close everything. It wasn't as transparent as crypto allows this to be. So it was very hands-on the business. We had to go and physically install the hotspots in each place, and we sold the Wi-Fi vouchers to half off to these people. So after COVID hit and these places closed, I realized that what we were building was important, but it wasn't going to scale. That's when I got more into crypto, and that's when I started venturing into blockchain technologies that could help me solve the problem that I was out to solve for the past decade.
Yeah, and I think that feedback or that criticism is definitely more bullshit in DePin compared to all of the spaces. Like all of the CEOs that I know, like Mike Horton from GeoNet, Robin from Wingbits, Charvel from Weru, right? Me, like I think most of us, we barely like crypto. Like we like crypto as in like an intellectual thing, but it comes with so much headache that ultimately has to be worth it downstream for building a massive network. And that's when you start to fall in love with this in a lot of intricate ways. So I think all of us were kind of trying to figure out how do we use technology to build a really cool solution. And then we're just like, this is cool. Now how do we scale the crap out of this? And if you can scale the crap out of this in a fully trustless way, that's when you start to build really a long-lasting protocol. So it's like by solving this interesting business problem, looking at cool ways to be able to scale it, and then falling in love, I guess, with that whole process, is you come up with really elegant ways to build a long-lasting bit of technology. So that's how I think about it.
Yeah, as kind of a follow-up to that, I think, you know, one thing we see pretty often in crypto is protocols that are maybe just a little bit too early for their time, right? You know, maybe the technology's not there, the infrastructure's not there. I'm curious from your guys' perspective, is there an unlock that's been made in the past maybe 5 or 10 years that's allowed you guys to build what you guys are building today that might not have been possible maybe a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago? Like, what is it that allows you guys to tackle this problem specifically today?
I mean, I think the simple answer for both of us is just wireless technology, right? Like, we couldn't do what we're doing if wireless didn't exist, right? So that's kind of like one unlock that it's like just an obvious one. Now it's just a question of how do you use wireless to better reconfigure the internet such that it's more equitable and better pricing and better performance for everybody. Like that's the nature of the problem. But then the other side of those things too is it's also where do we have this expanding market that comes into play, right? Like, I don't think there would be so many DePin companies that do GPUs if there wasn't an AI boom, right? There's all of these kind of like hidden demand signals that end up spurring investor involvement and all of this kind of stuff that flows downstream of that. But I think for us, you know, you can speak for this, Charvel, but definitely wireless is kind of what's been the biggest unlock. But then the second one too is I would say there is like, if you look at the internet supply chain, internet is just so cheap at data centers and it's just so expensive not at data centers. So the fact that the supply chain is getting hyper optimized in the wholesale side and wireless allows you to go from wholesale to retail, that has been sort of the big unlock that we've been playing with.
Right, so adding to that, because of course the improvement of wireless has made it available for us to build what we're building, but I also think that right now we have the ability to transparently reward everybody that we didn't have 5-10 years ago. That's one. In our specific case, also the pricing of hardware manufacturing has dropped a lot, so that allows us to provide probably one of the cheapest Wi-Fi routers in the market today on the DePin ecosystem. And we even went a little bit farther than that. We built firmware, as I mentioned before, because we believe that if we want to build this billion hotspot network, we need to make it as accessible for everybody to join. So firmware allows anybody to bring hotspots or existing devices that today are not Passpoint or Hotspot 2.0 capable, and we turn it into Weru hotspots that provide the same services that a device that we have. Another thing that I believe helped us is cellular penetration today. You can go to every corner of the world, you'll have somebody with a phone, but there won't be connectivity. So yeah, so the opportunity is huge. Connectivity, demand is just growing every day.
Yeah, and I'll also add, Charvel said something very important, that unless you're kind of like nerding out on the hardware and technology, you're not really going to see the power of it. But that's the fact that these embedded devices, these like low power, lower performance devices that are getting higher and higher performance, it's very accessible for you to get involved in it these days. So if you're like a developer that wants to build like a little sensor that you stick in the soil or a sensor you put in your home, whatever that is, it's getting easier and easier to get involved with this because of so many different technologies. Like a good one is like MediaTek, right? Their systems on chips are now full-fledged platforms that can run like an operating system as if you were like a normal developer, right? So it's getting so much easier to build and interact with these devices. So you have a lot of opportunities where if you're trying to build a DePin protocol, it's very easy to make this custom hardware that you need, and then you can just push it out to the market. Like that's kind of blown me away by how easy it's been to be able to get involved in that side.
And one more thing, when we started this in 2021, DePin wasn't a thing. So it was hard to explain to people, to investors, to communities, to blockchain. It was hard to explain to everybody what we were trying to do. So I think that the adoption of DePin as a concept that puts us all like in these buckets, so it's easier for people to understand. And not just that, but investors, communities, and blockchains now understand the importance of this decentralized infrastructure.
Yeah, I think both of you guys brought up really good points. One, on the hardware side, like the floor has risen, right? And it's a lot easier to get high quality hardware. And I think that's a trend that I'm not willing to bet against. It's going to continue to get more effective. It's going to continue to get cheaper, which eventually just makes your margins better, the opportunity for people to participate in the network better, more decentralization. And so that's just a trend I think it's pretty obvious to continue to bet on. So I guess switching gears a little bit is, what do you guys think is broken about internet infrastructure today? Because both of you guys are obviously tackling this from very different angles. What is it about internet infrastructure today that you're like, this is fucked up, we have to fix it?
Centralization.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that incumbents focus on profits instead of ubiquitous access. So decentralized systems can focus on bringing connectivity to places where there is no connectivity today, because you can get rewarded in tokens for providing the coverage even before the network starts getting used, at least in our case. So I believe that the problem today is centralization, and in the future, I don't think that DePin is going to take over the incumbents. I think that the incumbents, DePin, and governments are going to work together in a kind of hybrid, private-public, decentralized solutions to actually bring ubiquitous connectivity everywhere.
So I'll go on a different point, because Charvel is ultimately right. I think what's interesting is that if we look at the next step, right, we identify centralization as a problem. What are the technologies and the protocols that we have to have in order to be able to actually meaningfully address that? And every DePin kind of has their own challenge that they're forging new ground on. And in the case of Dawn, it's actually quite a simple one, where if you accept centralization as a problem, you accept wireless is the best means towards being able to achieve that, the next thing you're faced is like, how do I actually get people who don't know each other to form wireless networks with each other? And that's like a remarkably fascinating problem, because nobody's really addressed that problem at scale, right? How do you get people to form networks with each other when they don't know each other or don't trust each other? If you look at like ever since the internet infrastructure was designed in the 70s, it was built upon people that would just call each other up and trust each other to configure their devices accordingly, right? But now we're in a scenario where the barrier to participation has come down so much, again, thanks to wireless, thanks to crypto, thanks to all these things. And now you need to solve this really fundamental problem of how do you build a network with people that don't know or don't trust each other. And so that's a fascinating problem of something that we're building, where I would have loved if this standard existed, but it doesn't exist, right? And so we have to kind of, again, forge new ground, do it ideally on chain, and then make it super accessible to consumers, right? These are things that have to exist at some point if we want to have a fully, I guess, like fungible, heterogeneous infrastructure, or homogeneous infrastructure where anybody can participate.
Yeah, I think it's yeah, like the biggest thing that crypto does, and has always been coordination, right? And I think DePin is just the best example of like the power of coordination technology and just the ability to create these like you said, homogeneous, like fungible networks that everybody can tap into, everybody can use, and it creates these public goods, or in this case not necessarily public goods, but really strong infrastructure that is competitive, is user owned and things like that. So I couldn't agree more. On the topic of infrastructure, how do you guys think about infrastructure? Neil, I don't know if you remember this, but we spoke like maybe a year ago, right, like before your first fundraise, and we had a discussion about infrastructure, and you talked about like maybe a roll-up as a service. I remember you talked about like Caldera, and then now you guys are on Solana, and both of you guys. So like when you guys go about thinking about infrastructure, how do you guys think about what infrastructure is best for us? Why did you guys choose Solana?
So we chose Solana because we wanted Weru to become its highest exponential possible self. And we came to this conclusion because of three things: speed, momentum, and velocity. So speed is how fast something moves, but in blockchain, it's not just like one metric. It's not like the speed of the finality of the transactions, with there's a lot of just conversations around that, but it's also how fast the community can grow, or how fast our project can grow within this community, how fast projects get funded, and how much the network is being used. So that's for speed. For momentum, momentum is mass times velocity. So it's not just how fast you move, but what are you moving? Like the size of the ecosystem is moving super fast and is just growing. So that's incredible, and that's why we chose Solana as well. And the third one, velocity, is because it's not just about how fast, again, but where to. Like, is there a purpose? So we saw that Solana was growing fast, it was moving fast, and DePin was one of the purposes for this chain. So that's why we chose Solana.
Yeah, I think when it comes to picking infrastructure, that's a very interesting conversation. And I have my own opinions about infrastructure and the cults around infrastructure, which is just like a fascinating concept, is like the level of cultishness around infrastructure. But I would say that the North Star that I have taken towards choosing what we do is something that Guy Wallet from A16Z told me, is you need to build a protocol such that if your entire leadership team dies in a plane crash tomorrow, it can go on. And I think that has been kind of probably one of the first North Stars that I've really had in crypto. I don't know if that's really kind of like a decentralized maxi type approach. Maybe it is to some extent, but I think it's more of like a sustainability, automation, scalability perspective. And so that's why I think like when I was picking my chains, and Solana was an obvious bet for us too, like you obviously have that coupling between community and technology, which again, I think is a little weird, but there it is. But on top of that, it's very effective for getting DePin out there. But then the technology is also just better, right? Like I don't want to have to deal with the roll-up as a service. I don't want to have to deal with concepts of finality. I just want to work with a platform that is just the best suited for it. And you could see in terms of like the entire team and all that stuff that they have behind them, that they build their technology in a way that's very accessible for folks like us. So for me, it was like a no-brainer in terms of just having less infrastructure that allowed me to make sure that the protocol was more long-lasting and bulletproof.
I want to add to that. I think that it depends what the project is about, because in our case, we don't connect people to the internet using blockchain. We measure the network, the usage of the network. We reward people for deploying the hotspots using blockchain. So depending on the use case, I think you're gonna weigh in on different things to make a decision.
Yeah, and then to that point, in our use case, we actually do connect people to the internet through the blockchain. So we actually take like layers 1, 2, and 3 of the OSI model and put them on chain using various different real-world implementations of those models. So and in that scenario, you definitely need something high TPS that can actually coordinate and negotiate all of those things on chain.
How do you guys think about network effects when you guys are thinking about infrastructure, right? So I've always had this thesis about DePin that certain applications in crypto, let's say DeFi for example, highly forkable, right? Anyone can take an open source code base and fork them, right? But when you have something like DePin and hardware, it's much more difficult to fork a network that has thousands of physical nodes out there and has physical infrastructure out there, right? And so I've long held the thesis that DePin creates really, really strong network effects. How do you guys think about like the network effects that DePin creates?
This is a complicated answer, and the reason is because it's got, I think, a very nuanced way of looking at it, where the way that I think about it is, what is the size of the network that you need relative to how the customer acquisition cost decreases over time? And those two intersecting curves is different for every single vertical, right? And I think like an interesting example is when you think about like mobility-based networks, you oftentimes need to have a very big network before a consumer can realize value on that. Like if I'm doing like a mobile-based network, right, I can't have just connectivity in a city. I need to have connectivity nationwide or throughout my state or however I think about that. So the customer acquisition costs will only start to come down substantially once you've reached a certain level of scale. You could also say that's very similar in terms of like GPU networks as well, but that's maybe a little bit more forgiving. Hive Mapper is like another good example where it's like on the far end, where you need to map like 25% or some significant portion of the world before people start willing to pay for that. So the customer acquisition cost actually goes down and you start having to have pricing power. So I'd say it's not a simple answer about which one fits where. I think it purely depends on the vertical and what Web 2 customers are willing to pay to have that new Web 3 type of experience. So hopefully a little rambly, but that's how I think about it.
I agree with everything that Neil just said, and I can add that a way of getting these network effects is tapping into existing infra. That's why I don't think we compete with incumbents, but we make them better. So yeah, tapping into existing infra, because I believe that if we go a hotspot after a hotspot just one by one, it's going to be harder to do than if I go to a large MSP or large ISP and get them to add 10,000 networks overnight. That will increase the interest in people deploying hotspots. It will increase the interest in other MSPs or ISPs to join the network, and the network effect gets going.
So, blockchains are really well known for their scalability trilemmas, right? So how do you guys think about just, as you guys are growing your respective protocols, like balancing, affordability, reliability, scalability? Like, how do you guys, what's the trade-off hierarchy look like for you guys? What are the most important things for you guys as you build a network, and what are things that you guys maybe have a little more leeway to kind of balance out?
I think the users have like the last say in this, who's using the network at the end. So in our case, our hierarchy would be probably accessibility, reliability, and then speed. Because our types of users that we try to get are people that are looking for affordable ways to get connected, right? So if we have a high cost of transaction, it's not gonna go good in that sector. If on top of that the network doesn't work, right? Or it fails all the time. That's why in our specific case, because it's different broadband than sporadic Wi-Fi or mobile, where you cannot have a person waiting a couple of minutes until the transaction is final so that they can get connected. So I believe that, again, depends on the vertical, but in our specific case, it's the user. Yeah.
I mean, it's very similar for us. I think, you're trying to figure out this balancing act between how do you make an appealing offer for your validators and the folks that are providing the supply on your network, and you really need to build a model that works for them. And I think you're like on one side, if you think about things in the macro perspective, you really have two competing categories of infrastructure deployers, and you need to understand how to triangulate this entire ecosystem. And the way that I think about it is, on one side, you have like private equity, right? You have guys that are fine getting a 15% yield on their infrastructure. And on the other side, you have a DePin deployer, which is not fine getting a 15% yield on their infrastructure deployment. And figuring out how to kind of triangulate those two ecosystems in a way that you can appeal to everybody across the spectrum and that it's worth everybody's time, money, all that stuff to get involved is like priority number one. And then priority number 2, I think, is distilling this down to a great consumer experience, which I think is one that technology companies or folks that are super focused on the technology side tend to overlook, where you need to build a product that people love to work with, a product that makes people's lives better, faster, some 10x improvement, right? It's all of the stuff that's like comes from like Web 2 venture, now transposed into the Web 3 world, and I think luckily people are starting to think a little bit more this way over time.
I do want to switch gears a little bit. One thing crypto historically has done really, really poorly at is go to market, especially to non-crypto audiences or non-crypto natives. So how do you guys think about go to market in the context of each of your protocols when a lot of times like you guys are going up against Fortune 50s, Fortune 100s? How do you guys think about the end user, and how do you get in front of the end user, and how do you incentivize, I mean, you're doing two-sided marketplaces, right? Not only do you need people to actually use the end product, but you also need people to, work on the network itself. And so how do you guys think about go-to-market as a whole?
Do you want to go?
Well, I think not mentioning blockchain is like key. I think in our case, we have these 3 groups we're focusing on. So incumbents, what we propose is partnerships where we are going to decrease their costs and increase their efficiency when providing coverage faster and cheaper. Then we have operators, right? And operators want to be able to participate from an ecosystem fast and affordably. And of course, they need transparency on how they are getting rewarded. And then for the final user, it's just get a free connectivity or very low-cost connectivity anywhere you need it. So I think, at least for the demand side, leaving blockchain out of the conversation, at least until the very end, is the best because it tends to confuse people. Sometimes you end up explaining blockchain, and they ask you about Bitcoin and other things that have nothing to do with what you're trying to sell to them. So I think that would be, and then you mentioned the big companies. Again, I don't think we're competing with the incumbents. I don't think that to provide global ubiquitous access, we need to remove what it's already there and try to build it from scratch. It'll just take too much money and time and effort. Rather, I think we are the perfect match for the current state of connectivity affairs, or we're the perfect solution for the current state of connectivity affairs, so that in the future it can become more decentralized, it can grow faster, and it can be cheaper, if not free, for everyone.
And I'll actually disagree with that take that crypto companies have done a bad job on their go-to-market. I think I agree with you, they've done a bad job kind of expanding the market, but in terms of like going to market with crypto, like these guys have done an incredible job. And so when I look at stuff like Helium, like everybody in crypto knows what Helium is, right? Like that's an incredible feat of a go-to-market that they've done. And on my side, when I talk to the telecom guys, even all of the telecom guys in Web 2 know what Helium is, right? So it's more of a question of how does it start to integrate and ingrain in our average lives. And I think Helium is probably going to be the first one that demonstrates this at scale. When you look at stuff like their $0 phone plan, which they have the best cogs in the industry to be able to provide that, right? Only they can really bear that cost at scale because of the decentralized network. So I think we're going to start to see that expanded over time more and more, especially crypto becomes a little bit more in the zeitgeist with, the Genius Bill passing the Senate, right? Like hopefully the stuff gets passed more. And it just becomes a little bit more normal to people where they don't think about it, but you see the really cool effects that a consumer can get, like a company being able to bear the cost of a $0 3 gigabyte plan from their mobile connectivity, right? Like stuff like that's powerful, and it's going to be more and more mainstream. It's just we're so early, so.
Right, go to market is hard because we're early.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. What is your pitch to users, right? When you're, maybe doing user research, or you're ready to go to market and you're going to the end user, or just the infrastructure that's in the middle that's utilizing or leveraging you guys. What is the pitch? What do you guys find are the most important levers for them, right? Is it cost? Is it network reliability? Or do you find that they actually are interested in some of these like more crypto aspects, like user owned and decentralization and things like that?
I think Neil nailed it in a few answers back when he said that if we find a problem for these users and we 10x this with a solution, either 10x cheaper, 10x faster, whatever it is, I think that's the best approach for users. So in our case, again, we are going and we are deploying hotspots in areas where there is no connectivity whatsoever. So in that case, our pitch is like, now you have connectivity. We don't even have, there's not even a dogfight between us and whoever's there already. It depends, it will depend on the protocol and the vertical that you are, that you're working on. But in our case, it's for users is that affordability and availability. The same for telcos, because those are our final users. Telcos offloading to Wayru's hotspots or users connecting to Wayru's hotspots or partner networks around the world.
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting challenge because if you consider the end state for DePin, which is something that I like to mentally masturbate a lot. So, but the point being is we are all kind of going towards a point where all of this stuff, it doesn't matter whether it's Helium, Dawn, Wayru, whatever, they're just going to be kind of like commodities, right? Like, and at a certain point, I'm not interested in like hyper optimizing which toaster I have, right? And maybe we're 5 years away, maybe we're 15 years away, but like digital infrastructure, cloud, all of this stuff is going towards that direction. And so my approach is like in the process of going from 0 to 1, you just got to make it fun and you got to find a way to attach value through partnerships, through distribution mechanisms, through typical stuff that you find bigger Web 2 companies actually have to face. But you just got to keep that end state in mind, and I think it comes down towards storytelling for your customers, getting them excited about what you're building, and trying to kind of go throughout this model where now that your customers kind of have pseudo equity in what they're building, how do you really galvanize that in a cool way? And I think that's like a ripe domain for building the next experts of like product and all of that kind of stuff. So I think there's a lot of cool ripe ground for it. I think it's just like in the process of going from like 0 to 1, you have this interesting area of complexity before like entropy is fully maximized at the end. So there's a lot of interesting ways to kind of slice and dice it.
Yeah. Last question for you guys. If each of you guys are really successful in your individual protocols, what does the consumer internet experience look like in 10 years?
I can take this one. So this one I love because this is what I use to explain to my mom and my dad when they're like, Neil, what the F are you doing? My dad gets it, but you know, point being is I tell them like, hey, if I do my job right, we will have done to internet what solar panels have done to electricity. Right? The same way that consumers can own their own infrastructure, get access to a very cheap resource and sell their surplus back to the grid. That's what I want to do with the fourth utility of internet and make this commonplace, make this the de facto standard by which people participate in there. And the reason why crypto is involved in all of this is because it's a collaborative problem, right? Way more than just other people or way more than just me being able to do this independently. I need to work and rely on other people to be able to achieve this. And I think when you look at like DePin companies that are doing GPUs and compute, they're just trying to do the same thing to the fifth utility, right, of the cloud. So I think it's kind of interesting how all of these stories follow a similar arc through history.
Right, so I think that interoperability between the ways of people accessing the internet is the future that I envision, where I could have maybe Dawn or Andrina at my house, and then when I walk out, I can just get connected to any other network available because there is like an orchestrating layer in between. Because if you go out today, you can find hundreds or thousands of Wi-Fi networks around, but you just can't use them. So right now, we are part of the Wireless Broadband Alliance, and what they're trying to do, they're trying to bring all these telcos together, but there is no incentives to do so. Only, yeah, we can get together and we can do this, and then I allow you to connect for free, and then I connect for free there, you connect for free here, but there's no incentives, there's no orchestrating layer to get all these, like, you can get connected to these telcos, but there's no layer that already connects all of them, and I think that is like the end goal for Wayru and for internet consumer in the future.
That's all the time we have. Where can the audience find you guys? Where can the audience find you guys? Where can they support?
Follow me on Twitter if you want to see some funny memes.
Yeah, follow me as well, at Chedraui or at Wayru Network for.
Cool. Thank you guys for your time sitting in the audience. Appreciate you guys. And yeah, we'll catch you guys next time.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.